what it is, what is up. Welcome back to my channel. It's a wrap, aka Yuppies here, and Happy New Year. I think this is the first video that I'm filmed in the new year. So yeah, Happy New Year. I might have said in my last video, hope that you're coming into the new year with good health, because that's all I could really ask for at this point. I had 2 weeks off between Christmas and New Year's, and I did a lot of reading, but I really did spend that time like reflecting and resting and not trying to do too much. But this is my final wrap up of 2024. These are all some of these books kind of straight into the new year, but we're not going to count it. But these are all the books that like were lingering from 2024. That was just all like, some of them were lingering since 2023, to be honest. But I just had to like finish them, be done with them, and move on with my life. Okay, so in no particular order, it just so happens that the first 3 are audiobooks. It just happened that they're audiobooks. But anyway, let's get right into it. So the first book I have is Parachutes by Takerra. I brought it up in my last wrap up that I was in the middle of reading it. And then actually, I think a couple of days after I filmed that, I finished it. But I still haven't picked up Parachutes Part 2. And I don't know, like, I want to pick it up, but then a part of me is all like, take a break, because I haven't started Seasons of Fidelity either. So I'm all like, take a break, pick up Seasons of Fidelity, and maybe by the time I get through Seasons of Fidelity, Parachutes will be out, and you know. But overall, Takerra, she's just my favorite. She's in like that, I don't even want to consider her urban fiction, because I feel like it's just, yeah, I feel like she's more than the, I guess, maybe the stigma that comes with urban fiction. Like, she's just a great writer. But like, if we are going to put her in the urban fiction category, she's one of my favorites. Okay. She's like top, and she ain't number 2. So Vin is married to Tali. And it's the holidays. He's going or coming back from a trip. I feel like I forgot this as well in the last wrap up. But anyway, she's expecting him back from like a work trip, and she gets this knock on the door, and she's expecting it to be her husband, Vin, but it's not her husband, Vin. In fact, it's the police with a child, and they're all like, this child is Dalvin, aka Vin's son. And she's like, this can't be, because the child looks to be around the same age as her last child, and they have 3 kids together. So she's just all like, no, this can't be. He couldn't have had a child outside of this marriage that in the beginning seems to be pretty much perfect. But as we go through the book, we go back in time to when they meet, and we just slowly learn that their relationship is not as perfect as we think. The book ended, and there were still so many, if anything, there was more questions that need to be answered by the end of the book than when we started the book. So does this make me want to just jump into part 2? But I'm already like, do I want to jump into part 2? Because I know this is going to be a part 3, and all my questions that I have, I need them to be answered in part 2. I have all the wrap ups. If you still haven't picked up a Takerra story, like, have I not ranted and raved enough? Have I not done my job? Okay, moving on to the next one. The next one, I actually have a couple of biographies, but I read Trina's biography memoir, The Baddest. I actually listened to an audiobook. I like listening to an audiobook, especially if the artist reading it. But this one, first of all, let me just say that I love Trina, love most of her works. Gosh, I've listened to pretty much every album, even her last album that had like a disastrous rollout that had that song with her and Nicki Minaj. Like, I still listen to that album. I've listened to pretty much every album by Trina. But I think starting in like probably like the late 2000s. I think her highest run was like during the 2000s. I think once the 2010 hit, like her hits kind of slowed down. this is a pretty quick read, or it was a really quick listen. I think it was only like 5 hours, like a 5 hour audiobook. I just felt like, which I've been feeling kind of like with a lot of these memoirs that except for one I'm gonna mention in this review, I feel like a lot of the times, especially once we get into their career, we don't really get, more so once you get into the career, we don't really get like too much like deep analysis and reflection. Because Eve also came out with her, which I didn't bring up. I started, I didn't finish it. I think I got like maybe 75 or 80% in. Maybe I'll do a DNF video. We don't really get too much, like, I guess, raw, unfiltered stories about being women in the hip hop industry. Like, will be interesting to me that that I didn't really get. And once we get into like her career, it is pretty fast, and there isn't really too much, like, it doesn't get too deep, like it doesn't really get too much into the weeds, which is kind of what I would want. And I think when other people say stuff like this, they think like, oh, all the messy drama, which she touches on her the rift, or the whole back and forth that she's been having with Kaya. I don't even think she says her name. That, not the messy stuff, but like, I guess the stories that kind of speak to like the challenges of being a Black woman in the industry that you don't really get. A lot of it was like stuff we kind of knew, and I don't feel like when she gave her perspective we got any new insight. If we're not really gonna get into your deeper thoughts, insecurities, how you really felt during that time, like, what's the point of even touching on it if you haven't really sat down and truly reflected on it? Like, what's the point of even sharing it with us? We get no new insight. That's how I felt. And granted, y'all didn't ask about my review for Eve, but I felt the same way about Eve's biography. The same way I feel about Trina the Baddest is the same way I feel about I think it's All About Eve. Like, if we're not gonna get into the weeds of the situation, I'd like, why even bring it up in this book? Yeah, maybe they need about like maybe 20 more years when they really don't care about the relationships that they have or whatever perception, you know. They're like freaking Quincy Jones, like, just like, F it, like, you know, I'm about to kick the can, I've done everything I could do. Like, this is my truth. The next audiobook I have is Cheaters by Eric Jerome Dickey. I have Hoopla, and there were so many. I've always wanted to, but Eric Jerome Dickey is someone who's always like, when people talk about like being young, people over on my age being young and like sneaking and reading books, they always bring up Eric Jerome Dickey, and I just never have read an Eric Jerome Dickey book. So this is my first time listening or reading anything by Eric Jerome Dickey, and I started with Cheaters. Even though I've been told that, I think it's Lovers and Friends is one that everybody's all like, you should read Lovers and Friends. But I have one physical book of Eric Jerome Dickey. I think it's Milk in My Coffee. It's Milk in My Coffee. But Cheaters is, how do I describe it? So I guess the main story is Shantae and Stefan. So Stefan is like a lover boy, I guess. He's had like this one bad heartbreak. I think her name is Samantha. He was with this woman named Samantha. Samantha ended up like leaving him and going back to her fiance. And like, since then, he's just been for the streets. Like, he has been just doing women dirty and not committing to no one. And on the other hand, there's Shantae. And Shantae has just like, she will say that she's loved each person that she's been with, but all of them have done her dirty, like cheated, not like, yeah. She's just wears her heart on her sleeve, Shantae. So Stefan and Shantae meet because she ends up getting like, she has an issue with her car, and Stefan helps with it, and they kind of have like this banter and just this magnetic connection. But also there's this fear because Stefan's all like, man, every time I'm in a relationship I F it up, and Shantae's like, every time I'm in a relationship the man hurts me or does me dirty. So there's definitely like this, like, they're very much into each other, but they're very trepidatious in the way that they like pursue or are in relationship with one another. And then there's Jake, who is they're Stefan's friends. Jake, who's just as much of a player. And then there's Darnell. Darnell is married, but has this connection, fling, this chemistry with Shantae's friend Tammy. And pretty much it follows these two parallel friend groups that are kind of interconnected. And it's very it's late 90s. It's very 1999. It's very 1999. 1999, Cali, LA, coded. And I had a good time. I didn't love the audiobook. I think I would have had a better time if I read it. And what makes up for this whole entire story is the end. I want to say so much about the end. I just want y'all to know that I don't see it for Darnell. I do not wish Darnell well. Because what he did was not it. Darnell, you didn't have to go out like that. You didn't have to do her. Granted, I know y'all had y'all issues, but damn, did you like her at all? Did you like her at all? Could you have done the common courtesy? But either way, it was a fun audiobook to listen to, in contrast to some of the other books I was reading that were not as light. I think the next Eric Jerome Dickey is probably going to be Lovers and Friends. It's probably Friends and Lovers. Girl, I'm going to get it right. I'm going to get it right for y'all. But yeah, that's probably going to be my next one. So this one was a really quick read. It was nonfiction essay. And this one is Elite Capture by Olufemi Taiwo. I'm going to read a quote because it will be easier for me to read the quote than it would be for me to try to describe elite capture in my own words. So the quote is, this pretty much captures what elite capture is. In the absence of the right kind of checks or constraints, the subgroup of people with power over and access to the resources used to describe, define, and create political realities, in other words, the elites, will capture the group's values, forcing people to coordinate on a narrower social project that disproportionately represents elite interests. The book is 150 pages. It's in terms of academic text, it is a easier read, but it's still a dense read. The book pretty much criticizes deference politics, or the idea that in order to make progress, or in terms of activism, in order to do the work, that we need to make sure that the most marginalized of the type of work that we're doing is in the room. So a corporate institution where there's only small minority of Black, maybe even Indigenous, let's just throw marginalized groups into the fold. The idea that if we have the few people that we have in that room or in that corporation that work there, then saying that, okay, so in order to solve our issue of not having enough of these different minority groups in our corporation, let's create this DI group from the people that already work in this corporation, and let's give them a voice to solve this issue. But in essence, the people that work in that corporation that are of the marginalized group are the elite of that marginalized group. So you're not necessarily answering the issue at hand. So in order to solve this problem, you would have to speak to the people of that marginalized group who are not in that corporation, who are not in that room, because those are the people that you're trying to reach. Editing Yudi here. If you want actually to know more about deference politics and a better explanation than the one I gave in this video, then in the description I'll have an article linked from Freddie, I think it's De Boyer, and he goes into this long explanation about pretty much the basics of deference politics, and that is 100% a more thorough explanation of what deference politics is. And I think will also give a better understanding of what I'm trying to explain with elite capture. Back to the video. If that makes sense, if I'm making sense. And anybody who's read Elite Capture and it's like, girl, you actually got his words completely wrong, please correct me, because I'm probably gonna have to read this again. I'm probably gonna have to read it again. I did so much highlighting and I need a second to process. I think the rest are physicals. I think all the rest are physical reads. So let's grab it in no particular order. I finally finished Fat Joe, the Book of Jose. Will it? Okay, I don't know if it'll focus, but I started this book in like 2023, maybe not even 2023. When did I move? 2022? It has to be 2023. Sorry, because I started this book right before I moved into this place, and yeah, I saw this TikTok of this person that was like, I'm actually like surprised that I enjoyed this memoir as much as I did, and I will say, maybe one of these days I'll like do a tier ranking of all the memoirs I've read. But out of all the memoirs I've read, in terms of like, because most of the memoirs I read are people like in the music industry, especially like in like the hip hop music industry. But this is one of the better memoirs, and I think it's just because of the writer. Let me tell you, Fat Joe had a lot to say, but also I don't actually know that much about Fat Joe. Fat Joe, for me, in my memory of music, enters my life with Ashanti in What's Love. And maybe I have seen him before, but like I did not consciously like say or think this is Fat Joe when I saw this man's face until that song came out. And let me tell you, he doesn't even get to that point of his life in the book until like maybe like 2/3. Like we were deep in the book before he even gets to that point in his career. But he does give a lot of like his background of living in the Bronx and coming up during the inception of hip hop, and how, you know, how hip hop has been an integral part of his life pretty much his whole life. I always thought he was Puerto Rican, but I think he said in the book that he's like Colombian and Cuban, which I was like, I didn't know that. Or like, I think he's just, I may be making that up, but I know like his stepdad or something is Cuban. I was like, this whole time I thought you were Puerto Rican, Fat Joe. But I think my favorite part in the book is when he goes into his relationship with Big Pun. It kind of reads like this love story, kind of like this. It's like Big Pun came in. First of all, I didn't know that he had only known Big Pun for like 2 years, and like the fever dream that was the success of Big Pun and the way he kind of like altered his life and the relationship that they had, like how he came in like Fast and Furious and how he left his life kind of like in the same manner, was interesting, a little bit endearing to read. I know that like Fat Joe currently doesn't have a good relationship with, I think, his wife. I don't know why. Neither of them have never like, or maybe they have. I'm not aware of any place that they've like expounded on why there's like this rift between them. But yeah, also you learn a lot about Big Pun in this. Like I didn't know, one, that he used to be smaller and his battle with like eating and food. And that like when he passed away, he was like 700 pounds. I was like, granted, like we already knew that he was big, but I didn't know he was that. Pretty much picked up the weight pretty fast. Like it wasn't like a slow build, or he's always been big. He had not always been big. So that was interesting to read. But man, the way he just, like the last couple of chapters in this book, he's just pretty much each chapter is about a person in his life or like a public relationship that we're aware that he had, like his relationship with Remy Ma. He talks about his relationship with Jay-Z. There's a whole chapter dedicated to his wife. But he also goes into the whole beef with 50 Cent, which I could have done without. Like, I feel like that's a story that I've heard to the ground. But So I was just like, I don't know if there's anything new you can add to that story. I wish it was actually a little bit more brief in the book. I mean, nothing was left on the table. Like, nothing was left on the chopping block. Like, Fat Joe gave us everything. There were some things I'm just all like, we don't need all your thoughts, Fat Joe. I wish it was just it's not even a long read, but it reads so long because I felt like he gave us like it's only 250 pages. But I feel like he gave us so much, like every aside, every thought that he had. And I was just all like, we don't need all your thoughts on all this stuff. Like, the inception of Terror Squad. Granted, I am interested about the inception of Terror Squad, but man, the inception of Terror Squad, he gives us from like 7 years old. Like, it's too much. The craziest story in this book, though, is Fat Joe has been in a lot of random ass shootouts. I will say that. Baby, it's not beating those, like, especially like, was it 70s, 80s allegations of like the South Bronx being like the Wild Wild West. Because I was just like, so y'all was just having a whole entire, like, baby, y'all be talking about the world is crazy now. Fat Joe's world was crazy. Like, can you imagine with social media? Like, with social media, I was just like, so we're just running in New York City. In New York City, we just running through New York City, just shooting people miles and blocks, just children outside playing. Like, and it didn't even happen once. It happened maybe like 2-3 times in the book. It was a wild read. It was a wild read. Fat Joe has lived multiple lives. Like, this could be, if anything, this book should have been in 3 acts. That's another thing. I wish it was organized a little bit better. It should have been in 3 acts, because I feel like there was 3 eras of Fat Joe, or maybe 4. There's like Fat Joe as a child. Then when was a Flo Joe, you know, that early 90s, like that's a whole nother era of Fat Joe. And then we get into the era with Big Pun, and then we get into the lean back era. And then I think there's like that lean back era, 2000s, and then tax evasion, and then, you know, Fat Joe after that. But the book kind of jumps all over the place because it's more broken down into like events in relationships. So like we're jumping between the past and the present, and I'm just all like, can we just stick in one era and then leave that in the past and move on to the next one? I kind of didn't like the way this book was organized. I talked way too long about this book. I did not expect to talk for this long about these books. I didn't expect to have this many thoughts. The next book I have, Linden Hills by Gloria Naylor. And if you watch my was it Black Classics? It's my first used book haul. But what made me read this last month was because I believe it's Kayla's Bookish Vibes. I'll just put her. I feel like most of y'all know her channel, but I'll still put it right here. She left a comment and she was just all like, she read this during the holidays or like Christmas time, and that's the perfect time to read it. So when I was off between Christmas and New Year's, I picked this book up, and it is very, like, I think for people who don't really like I don't actually like reading holiday, especially like Christmassy romance. I don't actually like reading holiday books. This is like the perfect holiday read for someone who doesn't really want to read a holiday read. There was so much good social commentary up in here. It's so good. It's so good. So pretty much, let me tell you what this book is about. So Linden Hills is this community that was built from the ground up by Luther Nadid. He came down from the South up to, I think this is like Pennsylvania, and built Linden Hills on a hill. Okay. And at first, like, the land was considered worthless, and like, once he finds out that there's nothing prosperous that can come from this land, but like Nadid sticks by, he builds this community, he sells homes to, you know, Black families that are moving up from the South to the North. And over time, Linden Hills becomes like the place to show that you've made it as a Black person. Like, if like you are a well-to-do Black person if you end up living in Linden Hills, especially at the bottom. So knowing that, there is these friends, Lester and Willie. So Lester and Willie, they're childhood friends. They're also like poets. So they decide to go into Linden Hills and pick up odd jobs in order to get extra money. And as they go into each person's home, they get deeper and deeper into like the insidious, ugly belly of this community and all like the dark, ugly things that the people of this community are harboring. And that pretty much, I think that pretty much sums up the book. So one, after I read the book, I had to what did I just read? So Linden Hills is supposed to be based on Dante's Inferno. So like each home that they enter is another level of hell, because Linden Hill is supposed to be like, you know, these black people have achieved the American dream, but they're actually living in a hell. Like the American dream is actually a living hell. So every home that they enter is a different level of hell. And, you know, Luther Nadid is, his name is Luther. And the fact that Willie and Lester are poets, which, yeah, it matches with Dante's Inferno, like the actual story. And the way that connect, like, yeah, the points that are made about, you know, like class and race and gender, girl, Gloria, when you read books like this, you feel like, man, I wish I could write like that. Supposedly, Gloria wrote this, I think, for like her master's, genius stuff. That's why I was just like, if Linden Hills isn't the acclaimed work, Woman of Brewster's Place is. I need to pick up that immediatamente. I need to get that immediatamente. Okay. Can I just read my favorite quote? This is Lester talking about his grandmother, and his grandmother always had this riff with Luther because Luther, I guess, tried to buy off her land. But anyway, also on Linden Hills, all of the people that live there, they inherit. Well, I think the first and the second Luther had sold the homes, went into business with like this realtor company, but he gave these homes to the people that were currently living there on like this 1,000-year lease that would like be passed down from generation to generation, which is mad. So it's pretty much they're signing off their home to the devil. But okay, let me read the quote. Well, I guess she meant giving up that part of you that lets you know who you are. She will often say, child, there's going to come a time when you'll look at the world and not know what the blazes is going on. Somebody will be calling you their father, their husband, their boss, whatever. And it can get confusing trying to sort all that out. And you can lose yourself in other people's minds. You can forget what you really want and believe. So you keep that mirror, and when it's crazy outside, you look inside and you'll always know exactly where you are and what you are. And you call that peace. You know, White? Ain't that real? Ain't that real? No matter what everybody puts on you, you can look at yourself in the mirror and still like the comfort of knowing who you are. The comfort of knowing who you are and not losing. And you know, there's some stories in here where people are like so busy being everything to everybody that they lose their mind. Like they have, and also I guess that kind of goes into values, but like they have no solid sense of self. They're so malleable to like the expectations or to the idea of what being successful is, that like they lose themselves. And baby was all like, baby, hold on to that mirror, because you'll be everything. You'll be the chief executive VIP, the mama, the daddy, the husband, the wife. And you're sitting here trying to collect and hold on and perform all these titles that like you lose who you are at the end of the day. So she's like, hold on to that mirror. because so many people lost their mirror. So many people lost their mirror. I was all like, that was Reed. This is another good one that spoke to class and capitalism. And I was just all like, okay, Gloria, because, okay, so there's this character named Maxwell. And Maxwell, like, lives this very, like, he does everything by the book. Like, he doesn't let his emotions get to him. He lives a very, like, I do A, B, and C, D every single day. It has ultimately led to his success, but, baby, okay. So Maxwell's like, what does he say? He says, I have to read the whole thing for you to they're not company, he said, a bit too quickly, and then turned back to them apologetically. They're doing some work for my aunt outside. That's industrious. Maxwell's eyes swept over them. No, that's poverty. Sorry. Like, I literally cackled. Okay, Lester leaned against the sink. Maxwell seemed surprised, as if a parrot had been trained to answer him back. Well, I suppose that poverty leads to industry. Baby, what a line. I suppose that poverty leads to industry. Ooh, and the whole conversation that comes of this, like, one comment, and how, I think it's also in this chapter, that Willie, who's not from Linden Hills, Lester's from Linden Hills. Like, let's say Lester's middle class, okay? But Willie does not come from Linden Hills. And the fact that he was, like, so heated that he was all like, I had to speak. Like, I had to say something. Like, I had to hear my own voice to tell myself that I was still here. I was still present. That I was still seen. I was just like, oh, girl. Gloria! I ate this ish up. I can't wait to read Mama Day and Women of Brewster Place, because the way I feel about Linden Hills is the way I felt about Sula, and I don't think I went on as deep of a rant for Sula as I did for Linden Hills, but Sula could get the same rant out of me, because the girlies ate the last book, because I didn't expect to talk for an hour about books. Hopefully I can cut this down. The last book I have is Triumph of the Yuppies, America, the 80s, and the Creation of an Unequal Nation by McGrath. This was another one that was like, if this came out, this year? This came out this year, but how timely is it? Also because it's about the 80s, and is Trump not, like, emblematic of the 80s? Like, is the 80s not Trump's heyday? But also, it reminds you of all, like, how drastic of, like, as a nation, as a society, how drastically the way our thoughts on, I guess, so many things have shifted and became more individualized during the 80s, especially in terms of, like, work, in terms of business, how in the 80s that it steps away from, like, worker-centered or employee worker-centered, like, rights and protections. And when we think about, like, our business, we think about our employees. Look, when my grandfather passed away, his benefits was in order, okay? And he worked for the government, and like, it's just not the same. We're not getting the same benefits. And blame it on the 80s. But how it becomes more centered towards shareholders and the CEOs trying to appease shareholders and the bottom line in order to maximize the profit that shareholders gain, and the beginning of these damn Ponzi scheme-esque loans that are pretty much based in nothing. that ends up leading to the demise and the crisis, the 2008 crisis. Is it 2008? Whatever, the crash of the housing market. But a lot of, like, our economic woes are, like, our real economic woes really stemming from the 80s and Reagan. I haven't actually done any deep reading on Reagan, but just from this book alone and the ways that we just touched on Reagan, I was just all like, ugh. He's the original Make America Great Again. So, but there was, yeah, so much that this book touched on, and I guess so much to like mourn in terms of like coming into the 80s, what ended up dying, what like thoughts and dreams and shifts in terms of like the baby boomers, in terms of the desires of what you wanted to achieve in life. It's interesting that it talks about like it's all framed in this community or in this subgroup of the yuppies, which are these young urban professionals who are high earners. A lot of them have gone to Ivy Leagues and they work in these white collar professions like law, or like I'm not going to say law, but a lot of these middlemen professions, if that makes sense. Like you're not actually producing anything. It's all like ideological work. Like people that work in Wall Street, like you're not actually producing anything. If anything, you're just the middleman. Like you're just the middleman between people, which is, I guess, is a big problem right now. But pretty much like the ideology that we associate with yuppies, that that they wear certain designers, that they buy certain cars. Evan Yudi just has a lot to say, don't I, in this video. But one thing that I didn't touch on that I was trying to make a point of was how also consumption, overconsumption, the way that how the yuppie culture is able to be easily marketed to in order to be part of a yuppie lifestyle, you consume these specific things, and that, which we see, a lot more these days, that certain, in terms of trends or certain aesthetics, that you buy these certain brands, and by wearing these, you mark yourself as being a part of a certain cultural group. And in this book, it really expands on how, in terms of the American consumers and like consumption, how it really becomes a big thing that was not of like, in terms of hippies, like you didn't buy a certain shirt or a certain pair of shoes to signify that you were, of a certain part of movement in the US previous, this shift in the 80s. So that was also very interesting. And it speaks a lot to like, again, consumption and overconsumption, which is something that, is a big problem in current day. So, editing beauty done. What we put on the lifestyle of a yuppie is actually like the shifting of a society, the shifting of American culture, in what our desire, like in terms of desires and aspirations, and like in that shift of desires and aspiration, how that materializes in policy and how that's affected us up until now, which can actually partially explain how we can end up with a Trump. Like in terms of like when people are like, how can the United States devolve in such a way? And it pretty much sets up like a significant impetus in like a shift in American culture, that in terms of like our as a society, our desires, aspirations, and beliefs, how they significantly shift to allow for what we're experiencing right now. And yeah, that sums it up, guys. I did not mean to speak for an hour, and I guess I just I read some books that invoked a lot in me. But either way, let me know what you guys enjoyed reading last year, because there might not be a top 5 video for me. But yeah, let's continue our discussion in the comments, and until the next time, guys, deuces.